Secretary Panetta, Secretary Mabus, distinguished guests, Big Mike, Meemaw, Peepaw, family of Dakota, close friends, both from Kentucky and from the Marine Corps, fellow Marines, fellow patriots from the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and our Coast Guard. Welcome to this Pentagon Hall of Heroes ceremony honoring our nation's newest Medal of Honor recipient, Marine Sergeant Dakota Meyer. I've taken the opportunity over the past 2 weeks to remind Marines from all quadrants of our Corps, from commands stationed around the world, from old warhorse Marines from years past to today's Marines of young warriors, about the significance of what was about to take place at the White House yesterday on 15 September. Prepared as we all thought we were, I doubt that a single one of us who sat in that room and listened to our president tell the story of what happened that fateful day in the Konar province of Afghanistan anticipated the overwhelming sense of national pride and profound gratitude for a young Marine named Sergeant Dakota Meyer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that there is nothing routine about what took place yesterday and what is taking place today here in the Pentagon and what will continue later this evening at Marine Barracks, Washington. In fact, it's quite the contrary. I'm struck by the rarity and the solemnity of this occasion because in my 4 decades of service wearing the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, I have never been to an induction ceremony for a living Marine Corps Medal of Honor recipient. This is indeed a momentous occasion and one that many of us will never likely see again in our lifetime. Yesterday's ceremony was equally important to the American people because it reaffirmed that despite the uncertain security environment in which we live, or the headlines that speak of ongoing crises around the world, our nation still yet produces young men and women who embody the timeless values of service over self, values that built our country, our core values of honor, courage, and commitment. It reminds us that we still have in our midst ordinary Americans who do extraordinary things, patriots who volunteer for the profession of arms and in doing so agree to stand in the breach of our nation's defense. Men like Sergeant Dakota Meyer, who are willing to keep faith with their comrades through selfless acts of bravery despite the imminent risk of personal harm. The New Testament tells us that greater love has no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. We have a word for it in the Marine Corps. It's called fidelity. You see, on what should have been an otherwise routine sunny autumn day in the Konar province of Afghanistan, a combined team of Marines, soldiers, their Navy corpsmen, and their Afghan counterparts came for peaceful purposes to a village in the Ganjgal Valley. They wanted to meet with the local elders to see how they could provide for the needs of their people. It was as honorable and simple as that. Yet a calculating and ruthless enemy lay in wait for them instead. The rest of the story you know. Many were wounded. Others fell on the field of battle. Heroes like First Lieutenant Michael Johnson, Gunnery Sergeant Aaron Kennefick, Gunnery Sergeant Edward Johnson, and Petty Officer 3rd Class James Doc Layton, whose pictures are displayed in the passageway outside this auditorium when you walk out. Yet these brave ones who fell that day were recovered. They were recovered by a small group of warriors who were determined to never leave a fallen Marine behind. Those were the wounded who were pulled from the fire sack in which they fought. Those who otherwise might have died that fateful autumn day survived. How did it all happen? Who assembled the rescue force? Who motivated these young Americans such that they were willing to give their last full measure to save their brothers? That man stood humbly before our president yesterday That man is with us here today, wearing the dress blue uniform of a United States Marine, Sergeant Dakota Meyer. Dakota made a decision to go back 5 times into that kill sack, not only for his American comrades, but also for his Afghan brothers. Think about it for a moment. What kind of a man would do something like that? A man who would risk his own life for someone he does not know, who speaks a language he does not understand, who is from a land that is not his own. What kind of a man seeks no credit or recognition other than to ask us to never, ever forget the names of his fallen brothers? A man of humility does this. Admiral Bull Halsey once said, "There are no great men, just great challenges, which ordinary men out of necessity are forced by circumstance to meet." Sergeant Meyer represents the backbone of our Marine Corps, the Marine non-commissioned officer. Our legendary warrior ethos has been shaped by him and others like him. Ordinary men and women, all of them patriots who showed extraordinary leadership and courage, both physical and moral. The essence of what we have been, who we are, and what we will always be is enduring, playing out that fateful day in the Konar province. It lives in the DNA of Marines like Sergeant Dakota Meyer. Dakota, while you have your family here from Kentucky with you, your dad, Big Mike, your grandparents, your high school pals, and your many relatives, I want you to know that you'll always have your brothers and sisters who wear the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor by your side. You will always be the United States Marine. We will never forget the sacrifices made by your team that morning, or your valor in doing everything in your power and beyond your power to rescue them from the peril and to return them to their loved ones. On behalf of all Marines, past, present, and future, and to those yet to come, thank you for your great fidelity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to introduce a man who has dedicated nearly his entire adult life to public service. Appointed in 2009 as the 75th Secretary of the Navy, he provides over a Navy and Marine Corps team of more than 530,000 active duty Marines and sailors, 280 ships, and 4,000 aircraft. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce my boss, the current Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable Ray Mabus.
Commandant, your words have the eloquence that mine will lack. Thank you for the explanation that you have given and the leadership and inspiration you give every day to our Marines. Mr. Secretary, Sergeant Meyer, and all your family, half of Kentucky, I believe, is here. Our Medal of Honor recipients, that honors with their presence. Ladies and gentlemen, never leave a Marine behind. These words are indoctrinated into our young Marines from their first moments at Paris Island or San Diego. They're not codified in any sort of rule or regulation, a creed or oath, but it's an ethos. It's understood in the heart of each Marine. And those words were made real by the actions of Sergeant Dakota Meyer in the Ganjal Valley, Kunar Province, Afghanistan on September 8th, 2009. As you all know, and as the Commandant so gracefully explained yesterday, Sergeant Meyer received the highest military honor our nation can bestow, President Obama placed around his neck the unmistakable light blue ribbon of the Medal of Honor. Sergeant Meyer said yesterday, and he has said repeatedly and consistently, that it is not his honor. It belongs to the fallen Marines. It belongs to all Marines. It belongs to the Marines like Sergeant Meyer, for whom uncommon courage is a daily occurrence. Today we add him to our Hall of Heroes, ensuring that his tale of valor continues and that the names of the fallen are not forgotten. I've had the amazing honor of presenting combat awards to men and women who've all done extraordinary things. The one constant in each one of these is demonstrated by Sergeant Meyer, and that is humility. Every time I presented a Navy Cross or a Silver Star for valor, the explanation has always been, I was just doing my job. What can not be more plainly said is when Sergeant Meyer did his job, he became a hero. He has a lot of family here today, Mike and Peepaw and Mamaw, 58 years married and role models for him, mentors and friends from high school, from the Marines, who have contributed to the life of this outstanding young man. Thank you for all you did and have done to make Dakota Meyer into the person he has become. During times of war, a lot's made of valor and courage, and opportunities to demonstrate them multiply. But even within these extraordinary actions, some of them just stand out. Dakota Meyer heroism is of that kind, unfathomable, awe-inspiring to everybody who hears about it. The President of the United States yesterday did an amazing job in recounting the events of September 8, 2009. The citation on the Medal of Honor does great justice. And I know that it's a difficult story for Dakota Meyer to hear. And I know he's had to hear it a lot. But with my apologies to you and my asking your indulgence, I'd like to tell the story one more time of what happened that day. Because I think it's a story that deserves to be told as an example of what Marines will do to protect each other, to what lengths they will go to never leave a Marine unaccounted for on a battlefield. You've all heard September 8th, Sergeant Meyer and his team were part of an embedded training team with the 1st Kandak, 2nd Brigade, 201st Afghan Army Corps. They were going, as the Commandant said, on a peaceful mission to meet with village elders. When they set out that morning, they knew the day could be hard. They split into 3 sections. 4 of the U.S. team members were with the lead elements of the Afghan Army and Border Police. 5 Americans joined the center of the column, and 2 Marines, Sergeant Meyer among them, remained behind at the rally point, providing security. And as the teams approached that village, just before sunrise, every light in the village went off. And minutes later, the world became fire. From 3 sides, grenades and small arms fire began to rain down from the terrace fields and from the houses, from the village, pinning down and catching them in a barrage so intense that no one could move for over 2 hours. Sergeant Meyer could hear all this and knew that his security team's efforts just couldn't get them out because of the geography and because of what they were facing. He also knew that air support was not going to be coming anytime soon. And so, without regard for his own safety, he and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez, who it's been my honor since then to award the Navy Cross to for his actions that day, they took the initiative. They got in a Humvee. They left their secure location where they could have stayed, moved directly in the kill zone to find their fellow Marines and sailors, Afghan. Finding the way of the battle was easy. Follow the sound of the guns. Theirs was the only moving vehicle and an obvious target. And it became the target for the overwhelming grenade, mortar, machine gun, small arms fire. And it was hit repeatedly. It had no supporting arms, no additional people. Sergeant Meyer sat in the unprotected turret gunner seat and returned fire the entire time. It pressed on deeper into the kill zone, came across wounded Afghan soldiers along the trail, and turned around to evacuate them to safety. After transferring the wounded, Sergeant Meyer and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez went back second time. He discovered more wounded and other stranded Afghans and evacuated them back to a safe zone with the first group of wounded. And then they went back. This time, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez wedged the truck between the insurgents and the stranded troops. And Sergeant Meyer got out of the vehicle. Exposing himself even further, ran out to gather the wounded and returned with them. As they moved further into the kill zone, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez noted how rough it was ahead and how unlikely they would find anyone alive. Sergeant Meyer acknowledged that risk, remarking, "Then I guess we'll die with them." They drove forward and met up with team members who were there in an unarmored pickup truck. The group returned to the safe zone to treat the wounded and to trade out vehicles. The turret of the Humvee that Sergeant Meyer, Staff Sergeant, had been in was peppered with pockmarks from shrapnel and had bullets embedded in the armor. Another indicator of how many close calls Dakota Meyer had from this completely exposed position where he never stopped returning fire. Then they went back. They went back not once more, but twice more. When air support finally arrived, they pressed deep into the kill zone for what would be Sergeant Meyer and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez's fifth and final trip that day. When they reached the village for the second time, Sergeant Meyer left the vehicle and continued searching for the missing Marines and the corpsmen on foot. He knew he was taking an even greater risk than he'd taken already that day, but he was following the directions from the helicopter search team and went to find the missing Americans. He ran through continuous fire, a rain of bullets and iron, till he came upon the bodies of the missing. He retrieved the body of one of his fallen comrades, ran back through the danger zone to the convoy. He returned again to the ditch with his teammates to recover the other three as enemy fire continued unabated. Only after recovering the whole team did the vehicles leave, still under intense fire. Marines never leave a Marine behind. So today, first let us remember those who aren't here. In particular, those 4 U.S. service members who died that day, September 8th, 2009, and their families who have a hole in their hearts that will never quite heal, but who were brought some measure of comfort because Sergeant Meyer and his team lived that Marine ethos. Let's also remember that during that action, Sergeant Meyer saved the lives of 13 Marines and soldiers of the United States Marine Corps and the United States Army, and 23 Afghan soldiers and police. People are alive today because of what Dakota Meyer did. Because of the courage that he showed and his brothers in arms demonstrated that day, families are still whole. Children and grandchildren are going to be born. Marriages and graduations will get to be celebrated. And his most fundamental life will continue. There are no words, Sergeant Meyer, that can adequately convey your country's gratitude for what you've done. There are also no words that can convey what you and your fellow Marines do every day. As we honor Sergeant Meyer today, I ask we also remember the more than 20,000 Marines still deployed in Afghanistan, still standing the watch, so that the rest of us sleep in our homes in peace. Thank you, Dakota Meyer. The person who I have the privilege and opportunity to present to you now is a fighter for every single person in uniform and their families. He has spent 4 decades in public service. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, no one cares more deeply about the people who wear the cloth of this country and their families. No one is more concerned about their safety and their well-being. And no one is a greater warrior for them than our Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. General Amos, tremendous regard for your leadership and for your words today. Secretary Mabus, again, moving words, and I know that you deeply feel the rewards of being able to, in your position, understand every day the sacrifices that are made by those that you are responsible for. And Sergeant Dakota Meyer's family and friends, it is a real privilege for me to be here today to pay tribute to this remarkable Marine. I want to extend in particular a warm welcome to your family. Your father, your grandparents. It's been my experience that for every warrior out there, behind them is a family that supports and shares in the sacrifice that's involved in serving this country. And that support and that sacrifice that's provided by families of our servicemen and servicewomen is central to the strength of our military. This doesn't happen unless every soldier, every Marine, every sailor has the love and support of their family. And it counts a lot. Throughout America, they quietly serve as the critical foundation for our nation's security. This place doesn't work unless the families are there and providing the essential support for the service that's provided by their sons and daughters. So I thank you for that sacrifice, and I thank you for that love and all you have done on behalf of Dakota and on behalf of America. This past Sunday, we marked the 10th anniversary of what happened on 9/11, which in many ways was a defining moment for the nation that still resonates a decade later. For brave young Americans like Sergeant Meyer, the attacks on our country were a call to service, a call to protect our country from the enemies that despise our values and what we believe in. A new great American generation emerged out of that tragedy. A generation that has proven the patriotism, it's proven the strength, it's proven the determination on the battlefield during this last 10 years of war that I think truly marks it as one of the great generations in our history. Dakota enlisted in the Marines, served a combat tour in Fallujah. He then volunteered for duty in Afghanistan to serve with his fellow Marines who were battling a very tough insurgency in that country. Those decisions alone set Dakota apart from so many Americans. But as Ray pointed out, he distinguished himself by what he did that day, the incredible valor and the uncommon fearlessness that truly went above and beyond the call of duty. As pointed out, he was outnumbered in the face of heavy enemy machine gun fire and rocket fire. Nevertheless, Dakota disregarded his own safety as he charged into the enemy kill zone again and again and again, searching for missing members of the Marine training team and their Afghan counterparts, searching for his friends. Wounded and still under enemy fire, he was determined to recover the bodies of his fallen team members, his fallen brothers, to bring them home. About that day, as we all know, he said, "I'm not a hero by any means. I'm a Marine, and that's what I am." Well, Sergeant Meyer, you are indeed a Marine, but you are also indeed a hero. You more than lived up to the proud Marine traditions of those who have shown what it takes to wear the eagle globe and anchor. Great Americans, such as your grandfather Dwight, who joins us today, and who served as a Marine in the Korean War. At the end of his book, With the Old Breed, recounting the horrors of fighting in the Pacific during World War II, Marine veteran E.B. Sledge wrote, and I quote, "Combat leaves an indelible mark on those who are forced to endure it. The only redeeming factors were my comrades' incredible bravery and their devotion to each other. Marine Corps training taught us to kill efficiently and to try to survive. But it also taught us loyalty to each other and love, unquote. Dakota, you demonstrated your fighting capabilities as a warrior, but more importantly, you demonstrated your love to your comrades, to those you fought with. And you put your life on the line to bring that back those who did not survive the battle that day. By your actions, you have earned a place in history. And the devotion you showed to your fellow brothers in arms will never be forgotten. Across this nation, in cities and small towns, like Dakota's hometown of Greensburg, Kentucky, warriors are returning from foreign lands to their loved ones. They are also returning to a country that will turn to them to lead us into the future. Like other great American generations, these men and women poured their sweat and their blood on foreign lands to defend this country. And like those resolute generations before them, this one is being called upon to help us to build a better and stronger America. For far too many returning veterans, these times of economic hardship, hard times, have meant a difficult transition to civilian life. It is our moral obligation to never leave behind those that have sworn an oath to protect and defend the United States of America. The same sense of duty that drove this Marine in the service to his comrades and to his country must be the same sense of duty that drives all of us to be faithful to those who serve this country. The ultimate way each of us can uphold the standard set by Sergeant Meyer and honor those that are lost in battle is to try and live up to the motto of the Marine Corps: Semper Fi, always faithful. The toughest things that I have to do as Secretary of Defense is to write condolence letters to the families of those who give their lives for this country. I struggle to find words that can provide some degree of comfort to those families. And the only words that I try to write is that as tough as it is to lose a loved one, perhaps there's some comfort to know that they gave their lives for this country and that they are heroes, they are patriots, and they will never be forgotten. It is some reward for me today to be able to look into the eyes of this Marine and say that you are a hero, you are a patriot, and you will never be forgotten. Sergeant Meyer, on behalf of a grateful nation, I want to thank you for your service and for your bravery. The future of our democracy depends on the willingness of every generation to fight for what's right and what's best for this country. And your story will forever inspire future generations to fulfill that fundamental duty that we all have as citizens in this great land. The fundamental duty to make sure that the virtues and the values that are the source of America's strength, that have built this nation, that have created this great land that we are a part of, will always be defended and will always be protected. So may God bless you, and may God bless all of our men and women in uniform.
At this time, we would like to invite Secretary Mabus, General Amos, and the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major Michael Barrett, along with Sergeant Meyer and his father, to join Secretary Panetta on stage for the official unveiling of the Hall of Heroes inscription to our honoree. The President of the United States, in the name of the Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Corporal Dakota L. Meyer, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving with Marine Embedded Training Team 28, Regional Corps Advisory Command 37 in Kunar Province, Afghanistan, on 8 September 2009. Corporal Meyer maintained security at a patrol rally point, while other members of his team moved on foot with 2 platoons of Afghan National Army and Border Police into the village of Ganjagal for a pre-dawn meeting with village elders. Moving into the village, the patrol was ambushed by more than 50 enemy fighters, firing rocket-propelled grenades, mortars, and machine guns from houses and fortified positions on the slopes above. Hearing over the radio that 4 U.S. team members were cut off, Corporal Meyer seized the initiative. With a fellow Marine driving, Corporal Meyer took the exposed gunner's position in a gun truck as they drove down the steeply terraced terrain in a daring attempt to disrupt the enemy attack and locate the trapped U.S. team. Disregarding intense enemy fire now concentrated on their lone vehicle, Corporal Meyer killed a number of enemy fighters with the mounted machine guns and his rifle, some at near point-blank range, as he and his driver made 3 solo trips into the ambush area. During the first 2 trips, he and his driver evacuated 24 Afghan soldiers, many of whom were wounded. When one machine gun became inoperable, he directed a return to the rally point to switch to another gun truck for a 3rd trip into the ambush area, where his accurate fire directly supported the remaining U.S. personnel and Afghan soldiers fighting their way out of the ambush. Despite a shrapnel wound to his arm, Corporal Meyer made 2 more trips into the ambush area in a 3rd gun truck, accompanied by 4 other Afghan vehicles, to recover more wounded Afghan soldiers and search for the missing U.S. team members. Still under heavy enemy fire, he dismounted the vehicle on the 5th trip and moved on foot to locate and recover the bodies of his team members. Corporal Meyer's daring initiative and bold fighting spirit throughout this 6-hour battle significantly disrupted the enemy's attack and inspired the members of the combined force to fight on. His unwavering courage and steadfast devotion to his U.S. and Afghan comrades in the face of almost certain death reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The Hall of Heroes contains the names of the 3,474 servicemen and women in our nation's history who have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Sergeant Meyer now joins these illustrious warriors as the 3,475th Medal of Honor recipient to be inducted into the Hall of Heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Dakota Meyer.